I'll report it to the cloud.
Thank you.
So I'm actually done. I don't have really much more to say, and I'm glad to open it up for questions and comments and thoughts. And
So, Stack.
just jump in. It's just conversation.
So you're not the only one with the same experience, right? And we did a lot of stuff throughout the country and also in Texas, as I mentioned before, and last night. But what one of the problems that has really mired the party and the reason for a lot of people leaving is in great part very poor personal behavior. And so I think that having, and also, poor behavior usually. And so having good, clear guidelines of what constitutes good behavior and guidelines also to, if people do not want to abide by the group's procedures, to have a process to just say, well, listen, then you this is not the group for you, right? And I find that that's really what turns people off. I mean, in the past 2 years, I've had about 8 people complain to me directly because I'm on the SEC about being kicked out of list servers or being verbally abused, and I have samples of that. So that, I think that that's no longer, a problem because we've implemented a process to minimize that. And one thing that I wanted to mention is you've been talking about this about systems change and systems for a very long time. You talked about it at a convention 3 years ago. The reason why you're able to do it right now is because the party has evolved and it has now momentum, and there is a structure with a steering committee, a regularity of meeting, and there is momentum. There is new volunteers, there's people coming in, and you have been given the platform to implement changes that you've been wanting to for a long time. So nothing prevented you from doing it in the past, except that you were not able to do it. And the reason you're able to do it now is because you were given a platform to do it. And I think that that's great. We need to change and all of that. So since we're talking about bylaws, I just went and started looking at them briefly. Started looking, and I identified a couple of things that I wanted to bring up. So if you don't mind, and I'm going to read the rest of it, right? And give more feedback. But one thing that I've asked yesterday, and I'm glad that it's being recorded now, is that if there is no sense of consensus for these bylaws coming into this convention, I again request that it be postponed one more convention if needed to really reach consensus, because it's the fundamental value of the Green Party. And
so, Natalie, I'm going to ask you a question about this because
I'm not finished.
Can I ask you? Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Since this has been going on for such a long time, and 3 years ago you proposed, the 3 months is not going to constitute the urgency that you require, right? The urgency that I see right now is that we have very important races coming up next year, and there is a timeliness to that. But if these bylaws have to be postponed to really reach much better wording, much better consensus, 3 months does not constitute urgency, right? The urgency that was given to you was we are creating the platform for you to do these changes, and have actually egged you in kind of unpleasant ways to schedule these meetings and so on. The meetings were announced right before Thanksgiving, so it's not giving a lot of time for people to have broad participation. So I just want that, now it's on the record, and it's really very important.
Okay, thanks. I'm glad it's on the record. I want to comment on this. And I also want it to be known, because what I hear from Natalie is an attempt to block this.
No,
and
that's not what
Natalie,
I said.
I'm going to mute you because I'm telling you what I hear. Okay, it's just my opinion.
Your opinion.
Okay, if you jump on that again, I'm going to mute you. So stop. I listened to you. What I heard was you want consensus. I want consensus as well.
Great.
I don't believe, can you please stop commenting?
Okay.
Thank you. I'm telling you my opinion from the way you talk and what you say to me is you're not prepared to consent to this. You're prepared to block it because you want to postpone it. And I don't exactly know why, but it's not a really complicated thing. It keeps all the major things that are existing right now in place. It's just redefining the structure a little bit to free us up and liberate us and move us forward in a positive direction. There's nothing about this we're still, at the end of the day, the main thing we have is ballot access. We do that at convention, and that doesn't change. And the money is the same, and there's still an administrative body to take care of things. And the things that you want to do are in there. And so if you need more wording to strengthen something or whatever, I'm glad to add it, take it in, put it in there. But I want to move forward on this. I think it's holding us back, and I think it's held us back for 20 years. And I've gone through a process now where we had something similar, wasn't too dissimilar, brought to the last convention. We said it's not good enough, so let's push it out, and we put it forward we were going to do a December convention, I think. Couldn't get it done in time. I got personal things and all that, but we pushed that back a month.
Yeah.
I got this proposal out in time. I've circulated it as wide as I can. I'm glad to circulate it more. We still have between now and the time we would vote on it or consent to it, 35 more days. My process and what I'm hoping is that people consent to it. And so if it came in and there's like, I'm not committing to anything. My goal is to have this consent to on January 8th. And so I would ask you to get on board. But right now, what it feels like to me, based on your comments and what you keep bringing up, is that you're not on board. And the urgency is because if we don't have a sense of urgency on these changes, that means we're willing to just let the status quo and the trends continue and the patterns continue. And those patterns are going the wrong direction. So that's been recorded. I've heard you. Let's hear from some other folks.
Can I, just a second, I want to mention, Brian, that you're misrepresenting my words.
Okay. What did I misrepresent, or what didn't I understand?
I am not.
I really didn't say your words. I said my belief. I was talking about what I see and believe.
Okay.
But go ahead. You tell me what you think you believe.
Since there is no clarity into what I said.
Okay. What did you say?
Okay. I want to make it clear, very clear. I am not opposing your effort.
Okay.
I mentioned last night that I had no time to read your proposal and that I was going to read it this morning.
Okay.
I have several comments onto the wording that I'm going to share with you, since these meetings are about sharing that information. What I'm saying is that I don't want to feel, and I don't want anybody to feel, that these are being rammed through. And so I am not opposing it. That's why I'm participating. I pushed you to have these meetings. They were announced right before Thanksgiving, right? So I'm not opposing it. Does that come out clear to you?
Yeah, I hear those words.
Okay. What I want.
When you say, let me just say something though. When you use the term rammed through, I'm not interested in ramming it through. I'm interested in getting consensus.
Yeah.
And so I'm not ramming it through to you. I'm asking you to learn and understand what the concept is, and it's not very different than what we've got, and that I believe it's going to liberate us to grow and be much bigger.
Yeah, I understand. But the thing is, consensus is a document where when you bring it to the floor, maybe one or two people will vote against, or very few people will vote against or have opposition. That's what consensus means, is that the majority of the people feel that this represents their views, right? And so that's the only thing that I'm requesting. That's the only thing that I'm requesting. So I'm not blocking it. Okay. But and if you talk to Lori Burton, who's the moderator for these meetings, she clearly says, sometimes consensus seeking requires more work, requires more time, because you have to really go through these deep issues of how we organize each other, do we respect each other's views, and so on. So it may take a little bit longer than just 1 month of meetings. And I would like to, with compassion, request that you be open to that possibility. That's the only thing I'm requesting.
I'm always open to the possibility.
Okay, so that's very important for me to hear it from you. Okay.
Right. And what I see, Natalie, is to me, the people that are, this is just what I'm experiencing is there's a small group of people that are active. You would be one of them. I don't know, I'm not going to even name the others, but there's a small group of people who have very similar kind of comments. And it sounds almost like an organized opposition. I'm not saying you're opposed to it forever, but it's like, well, the inability to act now, and now's not today, it's a month from now, it's 5 weeks from now to learn about this. There's nothing in here that I think scary that does anything. And so you have 5 weeks to learn and get on board. And if you get on board, okay, let me just say this, if you get on board, I expect others to get on board. And so what I hear right now is mostly resistance, and you don't, maybe it's not there, but that's just what I hear.
Do you remember last night that I mentioned that one of the things that what you're hearing a lot, especially coming from me, is fear and trauma, like emotional hurt, violence with words. And I would like to, to point out that there is just one comment that came out here that I'm hysterically desperate to control. And I think that that's the sort of comment and personal behavior that's very hurtful. It's on a chat. And that, when I have a group of people who verbally direct things at me, I do have concerns, right? Because that's the sort of behavior that drives people away. And
what behavior are you talking about? What's in the chat?
It's in the chat, and I'm not going to say who, but it's in the chat, and the chat is going to be saved. But I see here, of course, Brian, Natalie is hysterically desperate to control. What's new? Right? I take that as a little bit of a verbal.
That is an attack, and it's not necessary.
That's the conversation.
It would be better if it was a nonviolent communication. That's somebody's observation. That may not be true, though. I don't want to get into a back and forth between you and I. Let's stop talking.
I know.
Let's stop talking.
Let's go through the document because I've put comments.
No. You're not in charge, Natalie. Let's stop talking and let's hear what other people have to say. And then we can talk. We'll go through it in a minute. But I would like to just, you and I have been going back and forth, and I'd like to hear from other people right now. And I do like Chuck's question, which is, other than wanting more time for consensus, what are your concerns?
My concerns is this. Do you want to hear my concerns, or
yes,
let others speak?
No, I'd like to hear your concerns because I've not heard them.
Okay. So I'm all for small cells and for decentralization. And one of the ways that I enact that and I do action on words, that I put words into action, is by empowering people to be effective volunteers. And that's why I have trained people, and I spent a lot of time training people onto using our tools. So that speaks volumes about the fact that I really look for decentralization, because the way that you decentralize is you share the tools and you share, the capacity. So my major concern is that we have very specific example over last year, and I'm not going to go into the specifics whether this is right or not right. But there is a group who last year denied that COVID existed or was a problem, and came out against wearing masks in public spaces in the middle of a very damaging, pandemic. And what we request is that that's not the consensus position of the Pacific Green Party. And that was reflected in the results of the elections for steering committee in January, where nobody from this group got elected onto the steering committee. So my concern is a small group using the name and the brand of the party to represent views that are not consensual from the party. Like, I don't mind if you as a green, local green say, I don't believe the earth is round. That is, that's fine. It's your prerogative and it's your small group's prerogative. But if the consensus position of the Pacific Green Party as a political entity is that the earth is flat, then you should not represent that the Pacific Green Party thinks that the earth is round. You see, that is a real concern, because then the consensus is completely undermined. And one of the, not me, another person Bob, who was here, actually, he has no state, he's a very new volunteer, totally no history with what happened last year, right? No history. He was like very, very concerned that there would be a balkanization of the party if different groups put out different positions about the Green Party positions as a Green Party. So in the bylaws, I want to specify that people have the individual freedom to associate and to represent what their group believes. But if that is not the position, consensual position of the Pacific Green Party or the Green Party as a whole, they cannot represent that it is the Pacific Green Party's position.
Agreed. So can I ask you to just do something, which would be to write that up and put it in chat groups.io or send it to me, and I'll work it in.
That's a good point. That's a good point, Natalie. Can I say something? What I want to say about this? 2 weeks ago, there were half a dozen Greens at the Portland Public Schools, and I was stunned by the quality of this crowd. There were 200 people, 250 people. In 1965-66, before the hippies joined the anti-war movement, we had an anti-war movement in the park blocks in Portland State. Middle-aged, attractive, articulate women from wealthy women from Portland, above Portland State, college professors, a very few students, a few old guys that knew what was happening in Vietnam in 1965. The exact same crowd was at Portland Public Schools 2 weeks ago. And I looked at those people and I thought, where are the young people? Believe me, this is war and the young people are coming. They are coming. A year from now, they're going to be here. They're going to find a political party, a minor party to get involved in. This is a tremendous opportunity for the Green Party to become, this is war. This is war, and many of us know it. There's going to be an upheaval in the political direction and participation in the next 2 years. It's going to be usurped by the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. It could be an opportunity for the Green Party, but Brian's effort, Dan's effort to open this somewhat so that this flood of anxious, excited people have a place to go. So keep going, Brian. Keep going, brother. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, and I'd love people to comment really on this proposal. I hope people have had a chance to see it and what's going on, because so Natalie says the PG paid battle was at a party at a rally opposing immunization. I have a photo. We are going to so what I got to say, Natalie, is if we're going out as Greens, we're going to go to rallies that you may not like. So if somebody, don't interrupt me a second. If you carry a PGP banner to a pro-immunization and masking rally, what does that say? We don't have John brought up a good point in how to handle this. John's on here, which is really that on things that are controversial and there is no consensus on, which is right now things to do with COVID, we just stay the hell out of it. That means you got to respect to stay that you don't go and say we are pro-masking and I can carry the banner to this rally, but they can't carry it to that. What I find is right now in this party, because of the dynamics of what happened a year ago, there are a lot of open wounds. You admitted it, Natalie. And I think to let that drive what's going to go in the future, what my proposal's about is stopping the open wounds. If 90% or 95% of the chapters or 90% of the chapters are for masking and immunization, those other 10% will, I believe, mostly be isolated, and I hope see that they are a minority. But right now, it's like those things. So
to respond to Dan, Dan's posted something about, yeah, we took the banner, the PGP banner, to a rally and put Lane on it. No, he mentions, which is not really very nice either, because are you accusing us of stealing the banner or of not writing our chapter name on it? I would like,
what I heard you say, and what I think is just somebody took a PGP banner and was at a rally.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I'm saying. It is not the position of the Pacific Green Party to be opposing vaccines. There is no consensus, and actually there's a lot of resistance to that. What I would suggest is for your local group to create your own banner and have your own banner. But
Natalie, it is our banner.
Well,
that's why we wrote Lane on it. We are the Pacific Green Party Lane chapter. That's our name. Well, Natalie, do you even read the bylaws? The bylaws give us permission to do that. That's the current bylaws. Well, I'm not going to argue with you about it on this call. Go look it up.
Because we've talked about it at a convention in the past, and that's a misrepresentation. And I'm glad we're having bylaw revisions so we can clarify that.
No, we're not going to revoke it, and we're not going to stop calling ourselves PGP Lane chapter.
Whatever,
we have the right to use the PGP logo with our chapter name, just like it says. And how are we trying to represent the entire party when we're writing our chapter name on the banner? Everyone who looks at it says, okay, Pacific Green Party Lane says this. There's nothing ambiguous about that.
Some people, what I see this going on a little bit is they're Greens who think that everybody should be a vegan. And they're Greens who are like rabid meat eaters. And we're never going to come to an agreement on that. There's never going to be consensus on that. But is that to say that somebody can't carry a Green Party banner to a PETA thing or to a vegan event? No. And what I see is the attempt to control these things. Like, I'm pro-vaccination. I'm with you, Natalie. I wish they weren't. I wish they were on our side. But the more we try to control it, the more we actually end up fighting, getting into this. Our bylaws, or not our bylaws, our mission statement and statement of principles say we respect a diversity of approaches.
So maybe, that's why we're having these discussions. And I'm not,
Right. So
I wish we could have a good, way to approach this. And that's what I'm trying to come up with. Right. But let me share the screen. This is when somebody looks at this, it's like, oh, the Pacific Green Party is, because it's so prominent, right? It's so prominent. It's like Lane is a tiny little thing on top of it. What I would suggest is for you to do your own banner, because you know that this is not a consensual position of the Green Party. It would really go a long way to build the trust and to allow you to do whatever you want to do, because I don't care what you do.
So Natalie, those are legitimate things, and I would hope that we would learn and move forward. And what I would also say is that we are making. Look, I wish that yes, it should say Lane bigger. In the future, that's appropriate. I think everything you're saying is appropriate. And I also think that I've never seen that picture before. So hang on. So 99.99% of Oregonians have never seen that picture.
I know, but it's just that, you know, I'm actually requesting in coming in good faith, right? Good faith, that's a request. And I think that
Okay.
that it is legitimate if you know your position, it's not shared by a majority consensus position of the Pacific Green Party. Don't try to represent it as a Pacific Green Party position. That's a request. I'm making a request, right? So now going, I know
Your
it's
Natalie,
request is
people do not
that's what we're
see,
already doing,
people
Natalie. We
don't
already
see the
write
Hang
sense
on,
language.
of
Chuck's on the
time,
stack. I'm
What
gonna stop.
people-
Stop.
what
Chuck's on
people
the
see
stack.
is
Stop, Barb.
politically active people. That's what's seen in.
Chuck's on the stack. Chuck.
Okay, so I made a chat remark. I want to observe that, Natalie, you characterized the Lane County people as being opposed to immunizations. That's false. They're not opposed to immunization. Their sign doesn't say we're against vaccines. They're saying they're against a passport. They're against a mandate. Big distinction. And I think that we need to be very mindful of the language we use. And I want to also observe that Brian is proposing a revamping of the bylaws. I notice he doesn't have language in there. He's missing a couple things, and people need to pitch him the language they think that needs to be included. On the issue of, so the bylaws thing is being kind of challenged by, Natalie, your concern for people going rogue and representing viewpoints that, as you say, are not consensus. Now, so what? So what? We don't have a formal consensus on this. What we should have is a formal agnostic statement where we say we don't really know what the fuck's going on because there's a lot of obfuscation and we're not getting good information. So I would like to see that banner read Green Liberty Caucus, Pacific Green Party, Oregon chapter. And I understand that you're going to oppose a Green Liberty Caucus statewide if it features the Pacific Green Party logo. You're opposed to sharing the identity of being a political green in Oregon. And you're trying to limit the free and full expression. As I said in my post, I can argue that being opposed to the vaccine mandate, an experimental use, all the arguments there, is consistent with opposing militarism, which is upfront in our Constitution. So I'm making an argument that the silence associated is deafening. It's the classic kind of, so Brian's not comfortable with it. You and Brian are kind of share some sensibilities and concerns, but there's a group of us, minority that we may be, that want to be fully self-expressed as the way we are. So I think we need to kind of parse these things, separate them. The fundamental issue here is, do I get to wrap myself in the Pacific Green Party mantle? And you're saying no. And that's a separate discussion from the bylaws proposals that Brian is making. So let's not let one thing hold up another thing. That's my point. I'm done.
Okay, I see Natalie's on the stack next.
Yeah, so Chuck, I think that you're misrepresenting what I'm saying. I didn't say that I'm opposing the Liberty Caucus. Right? I don't know where you got that from. So I just want, don't put words on my mouth. This is not the first time that I'm being misrepresented. But, in the same way that you want to have your freedom of expression, which I wholeheartedly support, you can believe whatever you want. You can say, I really very, very much it's all to you. And I don't attack you verbally for it. But if you impose your minority position on a majority of the people, you're basically usurping my free speech and my position. And that's where I want to mutual respect. Like for your Liberty Caucus, you can have Green Liberty Caucus and something, But if it's, if you know that the position is not shared by a majority of the party, I would not use the Pacific Green Party because it would be usurping other people's position. So what I would like to do is actually go and show some of the wording that I would like to suggest, mention, concerns, because this is about the bylaws and we haven't really spoken about the bylaws.
I want to hear Dan, and then we'll come back to you and do that. I'd also, though, what I would ask Natalie is to just send me the things, because just talk about them in a concept. I don't want to wordsmith things here, but I will go to Dan, and then I'll come back to you, and we'll look at what the sections you have concerns about. Dan?
I almost feel like we're just in a marathon here where we keep coming back over and over again to this claim that chapters and individuals speaking under their chapter name with the name of their chapter on their banner are trying to represent everybody else. When did we try to do that? In general, I haven't seen anyone try to do that. I haven't seen Chuck's new chapter that he's forming, claiming that it's going to be representing the party. Naming it a caucus and a chapter implicitly in and of itself tells everyone who sees the name of the chapter that it's not trying to represent the entire party. It's going to represent everyone who joins it. What's the problem with that? No one is trying to represent the entire party. And I think that's clear to everybody. And it just boggles my mind how we keep coming round and round to say, oh, well, no, you're trying to represent the party. It's becoming absurd. This is almost like theater to me. Over.
Natalie's like, so, maybe what I would suggest is to change the name of the chapter so it doesn't have Pacific Green Party on it. I mean, would that be a request that you guys would agree to?
The Pacific Green Party is made of chapters, Natalie. We're the fundamental elements of the party. To not name our chapter Pacific Green Party this or Pacific Green Party that is absurd. And it is already, as I just said, entirely clear that a chapter, Pacific Green Party Lane or Portland or Salem, is a subset of the party and not claiming to represent the entire whole.
And I don't want to get into a back and forth here. One of the things I would say that's, I think, super important for us is to be working on what we're for. You're against that, Dan's against that. It's like, it just puts us in the fight. And this is the thing that I see in the Green Party. This is one of the subset problems I've seen in the Green Party is, since anytime we create a hierarchical structure, and we had at first city, county, state, national, people, the first thing they do when they join that is they start to write rules on how are we going to decide A and B, because they're concerned with, like, how do I get power to decide my issue? And it puts us like in a bag of fighting about, should we have solar or government supplied solar, or should it be bikes or buses? And we're fighting about it. Everything, our system systematically pits us against each other at every place. In the proposal that I've got, one of the beauties of it is it's like, we don't know right now in the short run whether mandates and masks are the best thing, or because there's long-term consequences to all these things. I believe they are. I'm with Natalie. We don't know what all our members think. You think one thing, Natalie. Dan thinks something else. What I would see is in our model that I've got is it's just ignore each other. Do your thing. Yeah. If you're doing your thing and growing the party and getting your message out, that's what you need to do.
Okay. Can we go to some of these things? Because I see here that there is no consideration for, respecting other people's position.
Natalie, what I hear you say, we're going to go to something else, but what I hear you say, when I hear you say that, what I hear is, if my position isn't elevated to the number one position, then there's not respect here. Okay. How's it different?
You know what? We have a difference of opinion. Can we go through some of these things, because it's 11 o'clock and actually, I organize on other things than just this issue, and I have other things that I really need to get to.
Yeah, put them up.
Okay. So, this is something that is maybe a little minor, but it's a little cliche. I don't think that we're a new voice because we're not a new party necessarily. And I would also like to say that we don't only represent people, but other living beings. There's a whole movement that we are really, this whole movement of corporate rights, nature rights is really going to become a key. It's growing in importance. And so I would like to mention here, maybe change a little bit the wording here, that we represent people and other living beings in the political arena, for example.
Those are great ideas. So I would just ask you to give me the wording to let people know. I mean, that's our statement of principles and founding document, and it's been in place. And
so
I'm very hesitant to change it, but those are great additions. So please send me the wording on that.
Yeah. So
Can
I
you
think
zoom in on it, please?
What did you say, Dan?
Can you zoom in on it, please? I can't read it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to send this to Brian. So,
It's the statement of principles.
yeah, it's the thing that the last version that he put up. So the other thing is, I personally would take out the Oregon Constitution because it's kind of, we can refer to it, but I don't think that I think it's unnecessary and confusing here, especially we declare that all men, anybody reading it is going to stop at men. And then, oh, okay, blah, blah, the people, blah, blah. I would take it out. I mean, I don't think it's necessary.
Reason, I'm not arguing with you. I just want you to know why it's in there. Again, these are our original things, and it was in there because it's like, we don't have to put up with what we've got, and the fundamental structure of government we can change. And
I got it. That was
okay.
just, I know that you're sending it. I'm just thinking that it's, if you want to be something completely new, I wouldn't just hold myself to the past, so that's personal. I would hear, this chapter here, I would add something about corporate takeover of all our institutions, because it really, it's not just an unwillingness of the existing parties to address fundamental problems. There's this whole corporate structure of usurping the rights under the Bill of Rights, avoiding liability. I mean, you name it.
Corporate domination.
Corporate. Yeah. I mean, it's basically the plutocracy hiding behind the corporate personhood. But I think it is really important to add, because again, I think if we want this to be a fresh document that's going to reflect what we're going to be doing in the next 20 years, I would add something about that in there.
Okay.
And also, again, the fundamental right to exist that other sentient beings have, not just the aspirations of the people. Okay, I think that, again, those are concepts that are kind of relatively new in the political arena, and not new to us, the Greens, but in the political arena in general. And I think that enshrining them in our bylaws would actually say a lot. This thing about whether there are groups, adding, for example, AKA cells, groups, and then you mentioned here, we have the caucus I think that what my suggestion would be to avoid unnecessary redundancy, just choose one word or two and then stick with it throughout, because otherwise you would have to mention leagues, clusters, cells, chapters. I mean, it's my suggestion, right? And I understand that you want to be, with this new terminology of a cell, independent cell, and I understand what you're going through, what you're doing, but you might want to juxtapose to that, like the old concepts, because some people are going to need more clarity. The majority of voters are actually older, even though, we want to attract young people. We need to
what would be wrong with like member groups, also known as cells or chapters?
Cells, chapters, and then further down you mentioned clusters, and so I would say chapters or cells, into groups, and parentheses, they can call themselves chapters, cells, caucuses, or other, right? Something like that. But we may want to come up with one terminology. Group may be a little bit too vague. Cell maybe, I mean, I like the word cell, but we may want to put cell groups into cells and parentheses groups, I don't know how you want to, how to word it.
Okay, I'll take it. Okay.
Okay, I think you got it. Oh, here, I think that we need to mention our secretary and treasurer. I think both positions are super important, and mention something else. And something,
I think it is down lower in there, but go ahead.
yeah,
I think it's down in the bylaws where it does specifically mention them, but I'll go again. I'll go over your notes.
Yeah. So, oh, I think that this, this 80% of a greater of a vote is too high. I would leave it as a 2/3. And the reason is, again, if you want an adaptable system, if you put such a high threshold, you may actually be stepping on your toes in the future. So I would just bring it to 2/3. 2/3 of a majority is a pretty high threshold. I mean, so I would kind of change that.
My concern there, just so the reason I made that the highest level is that, our principles are pretty bedrock.
Yeah, but as you can see, we can change them, right? Because our concept of who we represent, it may be, things might be changing, right? So I think that if you put 80%, even though we're pretty bedrock, you may be I think it's too high.
Okay.
That's a suggestion. I think it's too high.
Okay.
Here's a typo.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I would like to mention that that would keep the definition of a supporting ruling party member, because that was discussed over 2 conventions, and it was approved very recently. I think maybe even last year or the year before, and I don't see the need to change it. Also, like again, going back to that.
What's the supporting member definition right now?
Oh, I would have to pull it out, but it's basically a certain amount of time within a period, and I think it's within 6 months or something like that. And we mentioned also that the equivalent in a living wage. So if people want to put money instead of putting time, they would have to put the equivalent in a living wage. And the reason why I think that is important is because as a group, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the living wage, but it's a pretty radical concept where wages are determined so that no more than 30% of your expenses are so that housing does not amount to more than 30% of your expenses. So basically, it pegs the living.
I do think we know what a living wage is. So what's the problem with right now? It says like something like contributions equal to 0.1% of your income, or
2 hours of work at minimum wage, right? So
whichever's greater. So that's because if somebody or whichever's lesser or greater, whichever's greater, because if somebody has an income of a minimum wage income, then they just have to contribute 1% of minimum wage. If they don't have any income, they still have to do 1% of minimum wage, or 2 hours or something of it. But I'll look at it.
I would suggest just keep what was discussed and passed like 18 months ago, right?
Okay.
Basically, it is, and I don't remember the exact, but I think it's like 2 hours in the past 6 months.
So what I may do, Natalie, is when we come to the convention, some of these things I may say, hey, we can have this clause read this way or that way. What do people prefer?
So the intent is the same. It's the threshold is really low, and the intent is the same. You're basically doing the same thing, but you're changing it again, right? And so I think that it would be easier for it to pass if it were the same thing as last year. So that's really your intent is the same. The thing is that how we, to determine annual income, we would have to,
Oh, it's an honesty thing. It's not like we're not calculating it ourselves.
Yeah. So that's just, I would keep the last thing because it makes you more consistent and it respects with and blah blah blah. I think that people shouldn't, the member group shouldn't just certify but also document, right? Keep it as before, 30 days. Again, see, that's the whole thing about cluster chapter. I mean, it has, I think it's the same thing that I was mentioning before. And I don't think that I read through the, okay, I have a few more, let me see. Yeah, let me see. Yeah, so I think that we need to clarify that, if this, I'm not going to go into an argument. It's basically the same thing that we've been discussing before, that out of respect for other people, do not represent what their values are. That's basically what it boils down to. So I'll look at the rest of it and I'll make more comments, but I'm just going to jump off.
Okay.
But I would like you to, take these very seriously so that we can pass updated bylaws and not just,
Of course.
because if it gets voted down, Brian, my concern, and I'm not voting it down, right? That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, in the eventuality, if anything came down, blah, 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 and it gets voted down for whatever reason, you're not going to have the opportunity to kind of revive it, right? It's going to be very.
So, okay, thank you. And Natalie, what I would ask is for you to walk away from here and say, right now, like the thing about, is it 90 minutes or is it 60 minutes of donations? I mean, that's like nitpicking the details, and that shouldn't be any, hang on a second.
Yeah.
So on the meta concept, what I would hope, because that's the important thing. I'm not worried about all these little details. I will take them in and we'll bring them up and put them in there and figure it out. But the meta concept is the key thing. And what I would hope that you would do, or I'd ask you to do, is to walk away and say, this is an improvement to what we're doing. It doesn't stop anything we're currently doing. It doesn't change anything. You can form chapters just like you formed them.
Yeah.
And it gives us all new way of bringing in new people and moving forward.
I am all for it. I am totally for it. I think, and again, I'm going to put it out, with compassion, kindness, goodwill. It could be, if you change the name of your chapter and take Pacific Green Party out of your chapter name, that a lot of the things would come, a lot of the conflict would decrease, right? And again, I'm just suggesting it. And we may want to put something, one of the things that I really love about your proposal, Brian, is it's trying to move away from geographic determinations and stuff. I really like that idea. But I think that, again, we need to respect each other both ways.
Of course. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to jump off because I have.
Okay, thank you. Just
okay.
jump off. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Can
I'm glad you were here.
Oh, important. Save the chat, please.
It will be. Oh, I don't know. How do you do that?
Before you leave, save the chat.
Okay.
Okay. You can go to the chat if you want. You can practice. You can go to the chat, the little three dots at the bottom, and you save chat, and it will save it.
Okay, I see it. I see it. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
I haven't heard from John, or Daniel hasn't said anything. Yeah.
Hey, this is John Q.
Yeah, John.
Hi, everybody. I'm in Eugene, and I've really enjoyed these discussions. I'm into constitutions. I want to rewrite the U.S. Constitution to be a green constitution, and try to host, a continental-wide, hemispheric-wide constitutional convention right here. But I wanted to kind of piggyback on, I forget who said it. I think it was Marv, talking about the changes coming in the world and the influx of new young voters. And I've been reading and trying to Google and find more about voting trends among the millennials and the Gen Zs. And there's starting to be a lot of articles out there about which way they're breaking and what issues are important to them. And I can pop in the chat, I'll find my links, but there was a really long thing by Deloitte, did a survey and a study, and there were some really interesting trends and interests among that population group. So I think that's something we should stay mindful of as we move forward.
Thank you. I'd love to see a potentially like an Oregon constitution too, if not a national one but yeah, we're stuck with some of that stuff. And I too think I'll just let you guys know, I too think it's absurd that PGP members operating together can't express themselves as PGP members. And my total belief is like, we're always going to have some people that believe things that are somewhat on the other side of what we believe. And the more we focus on those differences and how do we keep them from doing that, it just sparks a fight. And in systems thinking, the archetype is called escalation. And as I don't have a whole dog in that race between Lane County and what happened. What I see from my observation is somewhere back, A did something to B perceived it as a threat, B did something to A perceived it as a threat, B did something, A did something, B did something, and the temperatures kept going up and up and up. And what I'm trying to do and what comes through in this proposal is to unlink that. There's not a threat, there's freedom to do what you want to do. And at the same time, the steering committee does have, it's not going to be called the steering committee, but the administrative body, if somebody came in and was clearly like the Ku Klux Klan chapter, the steering committee, or it's got a different name, but the administrative body clearly has the power to say, Ku Klux Klan chapter, you're out. And then what I have in the current bylaws is that would be a temporary suspension. At the next convention, we would put that to a vote, so they don't have ultimate power and authority, but it comes back to our members. And at the convention, the members of that chapter would not be able to vote, and the steering committee would not be able to vote because they've already had their say. So it would really come to the other members of the party to go up or down. Did the administrative body make a good decision or a bad decision? And that would be it. That's what I have in there. It's not perfect, but I also think this whole model that I've got is going to reduce the amount of infighting. It's just like, just kind of put your blinders on and ignore what they're doing. Go do your own thing, and it'll take care of itself.
Hey, Brian, can I jump in very briefly?
Yeah.
So I did ask to be on the stack. I made a note. I think Natalie is not being reasonable. I think she's making a bad faith claim that we don't get to wrap ourselves in the Pacific Green Party mantle. We don't, that's what she's basically saying. And I don't think your bylaws, no matter how you frame this, how you do this, unless there's some language that this is so fundamental to her identity as a green and as a fixer and a controller. I mean, I'm just going to.
I don't want to talk. I don't want to. Natalie's
Brian, stop. I'm
no,
just saying.
I'm going to say just
that is that's where we're stuck. And I've offered that if she was sincere and in good faith, that the PGP SEC would have issued a statement to distance. And the statement would simply read, the PGP is agnostic, or we whatever. But my argument is that if you take her logic and you argue it and litigate it, it's going to be revealed to be fundamentally fallacious and not grounded in our values. I'm done. I mean, she doesn't have standards.
John offered a position, I think, one time, and John, I'll let you speak for yourself, but I think it really makes sense, which is we have so much more in common than we do against apart. And on issues where there's clearly not consensus, and I don't think there's very many of these, but when something comes up that's as controversial as this has been, the party just stayed quiet on it and understand that there is a diversity of opinions in it. And neither of them are green. Neither side is greener than the other side. I can see greens falling on both sides of this issue. And John, tell us what your thoughts were on that.
Well, just, back to the U.S. Constitutional Convention scheme that I'm trying to cook up. I'm coming at it really from a technocratic kind of point of view, a process, public administration, mechanistic way. And it's like, what will the next mode of governance, what should it be? And with rights of nature, watershed based, let's get past the slaveocracy constitution. How should we live? What should our justice system look like? So my solution though was just a scheme for finding consensus, always finding either consensus or a 2/3 vote on any issue, and something like this, very mechanistically, it's like, um, side one presents their position. Side two either agrees with it or doesn't. It goes to group three, and they either vote to decide it or they send it back to the first two groups. In the meantime, the party doesn't have a position. When all three groups agree, bam, then it's a statement. It comes out through whoever the media people are, and it's all procedural to derive consensus or 2/3, and then the people issuing the statements is sort of follow the paperwork. It could all be automated, right? So
I like the idea.
that's my 2 cents there. Thank you.
Yeah, I like the idea, and I also hope my proposal on the cellular structure. I hope we will evolve systems and processes where the cells, so let's just say we had 100 cells, 200 cells, 300 cells, 500 cells. The idea here is to grow this party exponentially, and we have 1,000 cells. Those cells, the important thing is that the cells connect with at least a couple other cells, and then this whole vast network is connected. Information and ideas and thoughts can flow through that network pretty damn rapidly. And I hope that someday we develop a way to say, how can we get consensus through that network? I don't know what it is right now, because I think Dan brought up a good point at one point, which is really, let's get this network going and then see what the problems are, then rather than try to anticipate every problem and write it in our bylaws at first. I just don't, I really don't anticipate big problems, but the inventions that we're going to do, the mechanisms that new pathways that we're going to create, new institutions. One of the things last night was like, well, maybe, one of the things last night that came up was kind of a little detail about, and we're going to end within 10 minutes. I just want to, was kind of like, there was this, I will call it a reaction to say like, well, we've got to think of ways to coordinate these cells. And I'm like, they will coordinate themselves. And Chuck's brought up for a long time the idea about having just a casual monthly meeting to talk about what's going on. I expect that to come, that's just such an obvious idea. I expect that to come up from a cell to say, hey, we're holding a monthly meeting. Anybody who wants to come in and chat, come in and chat. Now, there may be 3 of those. There's nobody who gets to call like, well, we're having the official monthly meeting. Nobody else can call a group meeting. Well, anybody can. And people will walk with their feet to what's the best one for them, where they get the most. And I see this about connecting in all sorts of new ways. So any comments from other folks?
Can I make a comment about, I wrote you an email about this yesterday, but I don't know if you read it. And I don't know if anyone else has read the full text either. The one exception to my agreement with you about how things are most likely to work themselves out, and I'm not anticipating big problems, is section 4F. As we've seen, we do already have reason to expect problems with the centralized structure stepping on the cells. And the language here, the administrative committee can temporarily suspend a cell for cause. What cause? As it's written, that's open ended, and it doesn't take much imagination to expect that, depending on how the administrative committee is constituted, it's gonna just make up whatever cause it wants anytime a cell has members that it doesn't like their face or whatever. Just
So
so
I wrote that, Dan, because there's people, I don't know that it'll pass without giving them that power.
I think it,
And I don't know what kind of causes would be, but it's just like the causes are really,
right. Well,
so the causes I would put in are, what do you think? But one of the ones that like I hear is like, um, definitely not in line with principles. And the other one would be some kind of behavioral problem. And what I have in there, Dan, is so the reason for it is to, and I don't expect it. Once this thing's flowing, I don't expect it to be used. What I do expect is like to let people do their thing, but if the Ku Klux Klan chapter joins and they're out there saying, we're racist we're Green Party racists, that they could the central administrative body would be able to say, you're violating our principles, we're suspending you, but they don't get to be the final judge and jury. It comes back to the convention, and the convention affirms that decision or not. I don't know what else to do. And
well, I see, Brian. I think this gives away too much.
okay, so
The
what would your
approach.
causes be, or what would you limit it to?
Okay, the approach, the argument I made during the last convention, because I anticipated that people were going to say, well, the Hitler chapter is going to try to join, so how do we crush the Hitler chapter? Which
Mm-hmm.
is just paranoia. That's never happened. Was to point to Article 12A in the existing one, and since you don't have that open, I'll just read it real quick. The party has the right to revoke the supporting member status of an individual who demonstrably violates the party principles in a manner so egregious as to create a substantial risk of serious harm to the party's reputation or function. It shall require a unanimous vote of the coordinating committee or a two-thirds vote of the supporting members present at a convention. So number one, the practical effect of not recognizing a chapter is denial of supporting membership in terms of internal organization. That's the only real practical effect of stopping someone from organizing. So this does the same thing, but without that broad banhammer of attacking a chapter or a cell. It just focuses on the individual.
So are you
And
saying, Dan, that you'd rather see the bylaws focus on individual members versus chapters and cells?
I'm saying that this punitive type of thing should be narrow to the specific people. If people are
Okay.
going to be accused of violating the principles, then you should be specific about just who to accuse. Number one, and number two, set a high bar. Now, this isn't a hard thing to accomplish. I wrote this segment here, and I got it passed with like one or two blocks. I think Natalie either blocked or stood aside. This was at a convention in Portland, where some of the people that would not normally be allied with me on issues, like maybe Michael Sonnleitner was there, and he agreed that setting the purpose of something like this is, as you said, if someone just really horrible joins.
So are you talking
So
about 12A in the existing one? You like that, and we should put it in the new one?
I wrote it,
Yeah.
and
Okay. So you're
and,
telling me to put that in.
I'm saying, I'm not saying this specifically, but what I'm saying is that I'd like the focus to be number one on the individual, so that you're not trying to punish the collective
Okay.
for the actions of the individual, and number two, to set an appropriately high bar.
Okay.
And,
Perfect. I
and
like it.
yeah, so I think the manager should be unanimous about it. If someone is that bad, an SAC should be able to vote unanimously, and a convention should be able to vote two-thirds. The one other thing is that as we are now, if we exclude the SCC and an entire chapter from voting on the matter at a convention, there's hardly going to be anybody left to vote.
I heard
like
that the
maybe 5
reason
people.
I did it though is it seems to be rather absurd to have, essentially it's let's say we have 25 or 30 people at a convention and 7 of them are the SCC and 7 of them are from the chapter. So it's 14 people of the 30. It just seems absurd that we already know which way they're going to vote because they voted on it already. And I was trying to go to an independent, I was trying to get them out of it because they've already, that's what I was trying to do.
True enough. It's just that the remainder of the attendees at a convention are not necessarily going to be disinterested. They're going to be probably already siding. Some of them, at least, will be siding with one or the other to begin with.
Yeah.
And
Chuck, let's,
main
I'll
point I'm
change it.
trying to
I
make-
was just, I put that in there just as a concept. I'm not tied to it.
Yeah,
It's not a big deal.
so what I'm long story short, what I'm saying is I think this probably gives away too much, and that you can get it passed by putting a higher bar in there
Okay.
to make
Chuck,
this a really hard thing to do, because it should be hard to do. It should be hard to do just anybody, but not hard to do to someone that actually deserves it.
agree. Chuck.
I just want to say, Dan makes sense. And it is a question about denying the franchise at convention. I think his solution is good. I'm listening. I'm done.
So Chuck, I wasn't denying the character of the SEC. What I just saw, it was like the SEC's already voted to exclude them. And they obviously want to be in it. And so it didn't make sense to me to have people who've already kind of had their say. And of course, the people who have been booted we already know their position. They want to be back in. And so my idea was to put it to a more independent group of people that haven't had any say on the matter, and to hear them hear side A and side B and make a decision. But I'm not tied to it. That was just the
And just to close with that, and that is, the convention is the convention. What SEC does administratively is what they do administratively. So the convention is the ratifying body to do this. So it's kind of like everything's brought de novo. So it's conceivable that someone, as an SEC votes one way, could be persuaded to vote differently at convention. So denying them the vote opportunity then precludes the democratic process. Is kind of, I think, what Dan is maybe contemplating too, but it occurs to me that that makes sense to open it up and not, I don't know.
Any last questions? I want to be done in a couple of minutes. I would hope that you guys will share this with people, have conversations about it. In about 3 days, I'm going to put up a final version, and it's going to be the best I could do. It's probably still going to be incomplete. I'm willing to, but we got to have a document that's, there it is. And then between then and the convention on January 8th, I'm still, what's coming into the convention and being presented is what was submitted on January or in the next 2 or 3 days. I'm still willing to take input, new ideas, and then when we present it to say, hey, here's the presentation. I believe, these changes I willingly accept, or here's 2 options for this section, and I'm glad to take a vote on them till we get to the end. And then my goal is to have hopefully consensus or a vote. And it needs to pass with 2/3 consensus. And I know that, but I'm hoping there's or 2/3 of a vote. So that's what it needs. That's what our bylaws require. And I told, and again, I also, just to be transparent, I do believe in that stuff, and I will have a feel for the room, though I'm not going to allow a few voices or a group of people who have had plenty of time to study this, to get involved and to understand it, block it, because We need more time. I don't think we have more time. And there's nothing in here that prevents us from doing exactly what we're doing right now, but it liberates us to do many, many other things as well. Any last comments from people before we go?
Yeah, be of good cheer and try not to worry.
You know, I just like to say, I'm surprised that there are so few of these opposing views. I mean, I'm glad that John is here. And I'm glad to see Natalie here, but where are the people who are who have these concerns for what Brian is trying to do? That's kind of surprised me that there were so few views represented here. If it's so contentious, why aren't they contending? Thanks, Brian.
My understanding is it hasn't really been released yet. This is a small group, sort of the think tank, to get to the final version, and the one that Brian produces in the next week or so, that'll be the big release with the announcement to the world. So we were participating as friendly sounding boards, and you know, and offering our ideas, you know, to Brian in advance of that, to make it as strong a document as possible going into the broader public discussion. Is that a fair?
No, that's not actually accurate. It's
Oh.
it's totally been released. It's on the PGP
Oh.
website. It's on the groups.io, which is where we hope people will have the discussions. We moving off of the thing. The only, and I will save the chat and post. I don't know how to get it out any wider. So there are plenty of people who have not heard of it or seen it. And I recommend people get it out there. And between now and January 8th, as we probably get it on more Facebook pages or things like that, or on Twitter or something, I'm glad to host more of these, but we won't be able to change it at that point in before the convention. It comes in and we'll make changes there. It's been kind of this myth, I gotta just say, that it's targeted like, well, there's not enough people involved. Well, then if you know people who should be here and aren't, invite them. These were all public. I posted the links. And, you know, yeah, maybe it should have, but I don't know all the tools we have. All I can do is with the tools I have. And I've never said to anybody, you know, don't publicize it. I've said, invite people who should be here, post it where you need to post it. I'm too busy in my life to do, and we're all busy, so I'm not making excuses, but I've moved and I'm getting ready to run for a political office. And I just got a million and one things going on right now. And some of the delinquency has been on me. And I accept that. But at the same time, I think this has been the most open process I've seen in 25 years for these kind of changes. And what I wasn't willing to do, John, was at the end of the day, I'm open to all these suggestions, but it's like, I'm putting in a proposal that has this very deliberate piece to it. The main thing is the cellular structure. That's the only thing I'm really concerned about. And the peer-to-peer building of the peer-to-peer network and relationships. What I wasn't willing to do is to have a bunch of people come in and wordsmith it together, because that just, you know, it's like, I'm the chef here, and I'm not in an ego way, but I just want to put a proposal together that has input, and you guys are all helping to improve it. And and if somebody wants to put something in and differently, then they're free to submit a different set of proposals. But so it kind of got tossed around like, well, it wasn't open for feedback, or no, it wasn't open for having it wordsmithed collectively, because that can just be a mess. Anybody else, or we're done? And I will save the chat. Save chat. Okay, I don't know where it's saved, but it's showing the folder. Oh, okay, I see where it's saved. Perfect. Okay, well, listen, you guys have a great day. Thank you so much for coming, and peace. Promote this. If you got questions while we're going forward or suggestions, you know, I want to have the best possible document when we pass it on January 8th. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Brian.
Yep, thank you.
Yep.